In this section, we're going to cover an overview of the core Power BI administration roles and types. We'll talk about some of the common admin settings and options, and also walk through an introduction to tenant settings available in Power BI service. And in order to do this, we're going to touch on the types of admin roles that are related to Power BI, where you can find the admin portal in Power BI service, along with some of the settings and options available from the portal. We'll dig into tenant-specific settings and talk about how we can configure and manage different features within the service. And finally, we'll wrap things up and cover how you can apply custom branding to your tenant. So commonly, the person or persons who play admin roles in your company or organization will likely be responsible for things like enabling different features and functionality for your organization, managing permissions and access for individual users, teams, groups, or clients, and also configuring and customizing the look and feel of your Power BI tenant. So before we move on, and just to set expectations here, this section isn't intended as a deep dive into Power BI administration and governance. The whole idea here is to provide you with a background of the types of activities associated with the different admin levels, how settings are enabled and configured in Power BI service, all with an end result of arming you with an understanding of how administration works at a high level. All right, let's dive in. Up first in our discussion about Power BI administration, let's talk about the four main types of admin roles that are related to Power BI. So we've got these four main admin roles. And up first, we have the Microsoft Office 365 admin role. And this admin role really covers everything from global admin access to user-specific admins. The Office 365 admin roles are all about configuring and monitoring all Office 365 services. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at some of these roles. See on the right-hand side here, the first gray box, we've got the global admin role. And like I mentioned, the global admin has unlimited access to all organizational features and settings and can assign roles to other users. And this global admin can actually set these other admin roles that are listed beneath it. So basically, global admin is just that. They have access to everything within the organization. Up next, we've got the billing admin, and they have the ability to manage subscriptions and purchase licenses. So things like the Power BI Pro license and the Power BI Premium per user license. Next up, the license admin has the ability to assign or remove licenses from users. And underneath that, we have the user admin. And the user admin is really all about creating and managing users and groups. They can also do things like reset user passwords and any other sort of user-related functions. So typically, these types of roles will be handled by the business owner or somebody within the IT department, potentially somebody within the finance department too if they're in charge of billing. But those are typically the types of roles that would be related to these Office 365 admin roles. All right, so up next, we're going to talk about Power BI Premium. And Power BI Premium capacity admins have the ability to create, manage, and monitor premium capacities. So looking at some of the details of this role, premium capacity admins can do things like assigning workspaces within the capacity. They can manage user permissions, manage capacity workloads by configuring memory usage. They can restart the capacity if needed. So things like that. Similarly, oftentimes you'll see someone in IT or somebody that's at the director or kind of team lead position that would typically be a Power BI Premium capacity admin. Third, we have the Power BI Embedded capacity admin. And these admins can really perform the exact same functions as the premium capacity admin can, but only for an embedded capacity. So things like assigning workspaces, managing users, managing workloads, and restarting the capacity. Same kind of story here for a typical role. It's really going to default to the person or persons within your organization, quite likely somebody that's on the IT team or again, at that director or team lead level. Up fourth, we've got the Power BI Service Admin. And these admins can do things like manage tasks and users. They have the ability to enable and disable features within the tenant because they have full access to all of the management tools within Power BI Service. They can report on workspace and tenant usage, do things like run performance diagnostics, and also audit the performance of the tenant. Again, typical roles here, and this varies from organization and role and all that fun stuff, but somebody on the IT side or a director, perhaps a manager, is now in charge of the Power BI admin role, for a team or for a project, or a team lead. Again, these typical roles aren't something that's a hard and fast rule, just some thoughts here to give you an idea about who may play the type of role for each one of these. So for the purpose of this course, we're really going to be focusing on just the Power BI Service Admin role. Over the next couple of lectures, we'll take a little bit of a closer look at the types of options Power BI Service Admins have at their disposal. So with that, let's hop into the next lecture. The Admin Portal within Power BI Service is where you can monitor, manage, and configure the different settings and options available to you. Let's take a look at some of the key things that the Admin Portal lets you do. So first up, you can do things like monitor your usage across your organization. You can do things like manage users and access audit logs, but this is actually only available through the Office 365 Admin Center, so you would need to head there in order to manage these pieces. You have the ability to configure your tenant settings, which we'll dig into in depth in another lecture. You can set capacity settings for Power BI Premium and Power BI Embedded. Again, if you're paying for either one of those services, you can manage the capacity settings or the refresh settings for each of those from this admin portal. Up next, you can manage, view, and edit a few different things here. So things like embed codes from the publish to web option or embed securely in a website or SharePoint. You can manage or view or edit organizational visuals if you've uploaded custom visuals. Same thing applies to workspaces. You have full control over your workspaces from within the admin portal here. And then also, if you have set up featured content for your homepage, that can be managed here as well. Next, you can apply custom branding, which lets you customize the look and feel of your tenant. You can do things like monitor your data protection metrics and sensitivity labels. This actually requires an additional service, the Azure Information Protection Program. It's a premium license type. So one thing to really keep in mind here with all of this is that the admin portal features may not be available to you. Once we hop into Power BI and we navigate to this menu, if you're not seeing all of these options, it's probably because you're not a Power BI Service admin. So the best thing to do is to reach out to the person in your organization that fills that role, that can assign you access, and either ask for access or ask for certain features to be enabled. All right, so with that, let's hop over into Power BI Service. All right, so I'm signed in as Samantha, and Samantha is the Chief Inspector for our team of Maven inspectors here. And you can see I'm on the home page here. And if I head up into the ellipsis menu here and navigate down to Settings and then Admin Portal, I can bring up the admin portal for my tenant, right? And like we said, we've got a whole bunch of different options here that are available to us. First off, we've got usage metrics. Right now, this is pretty sparse. There's really nothing that we've done within our tenant right now. As we continue to add content and more users log in, this dashboard will become populated with a lot more metrics and become much more meaningful. Like I was saying, you can manage users, admins, and groups. This actually provides a link to go to the Office 365 Admin Center to be able to manage those components there. If premium per user is enabled for your tenant, this is where you can adjust some of the premium per user settings. Again, right now this is a preview feature. It's very likely that these features or options will change over time. Same thing with the audit logs here. all of this is managed in Office 365 in that Admin Center view. Tenant settings, there's a ton of different tenant settings that can be set and adjusted. We're actually going to dig into this in the next lecture. Like I was talking about, if we are subscribed to either Power BI Premium or Power BI Embedded, here's where those capacity settings would show up, right? And you could toggle between the two to look at those settings. You could also check out the different refresh schedules and history, select your capacity, all that kind of fun stuff. Embed codes. So this is where you can manage any of those embed codes that you may have. So things like publishing to web, that generates an embed code. You can generate an embed code so that you can securely embed a report or a visual into a website or an application that you may have. Additionally, there's also the ability to embed securely in SharePoint. So you can manage all of those types of embed codes from here for your entire organization and not just your specific workspace. If we had any organizational visuals, this is where they would appear. There's an option here to connect to Azure resources that we can assign tenant level storage. Again, if this is something that we are paying for, or your organization is paying for, this is something that you would have access to. So from here, I'm actually going to collapse this view a little bit. This is actually a kind of a cool view. You can actually see all of the workspaces that have been created for your tenant. Right? You can see here that we've got 13, and then go down all the way. So one of the cool things here is if you click on these vertical 3 dots for more options, or here they call it actions, you can find out some details about the workspace. This just gives us an ID, a unique ID for that workspace. But you can also edit it, and if it was deleted, you could restore it. Right? So, for example, if we look at my first workspace here, and we edit it, we actually see that there's a misspelling here. Right? So we could go in, we could correct that misspelling, click Save, and now we see it's correctly spelled as my first workspace. You can also look at who has access to each of these workspaces. All right, so right now, we see that it's Dylan Kruger, and he is an admin. He has an admin permission for this workspace. You can also add other people to this workspace right from this view. Right? You can type in their email and set them up as an admin, contributor, member, or viewer. Right? And we'll get into this stuff later, how you can add people to different workspaces so you can share and collaborate with them. But we see all of our workspaces listed here, right? And what's interesting is it actually lists your My Workspace. So down here, you see that this is a private group. This is the type it is. And if we hover over it, it says Personal Workspace Maven. It says Personal Workspace Brett. Personal Workspace Dylan. And then Personal Workspace Samantha. So we're actually seeing all of the personal workspaces for folks that have logged in from our team, from Maven Inspectional Services. Pretty cool that you can see all that stuff here. So moving along, we've got custom branding. In an upcoming pro tip lecture, we'll actually dig into how you can set up custom branding. But again, this lets you customize the look and feel of Power BI for your entire organization. We've got this data protection metrics. And this allows you to apply different sensitivity labels to your data sets and your content within Power BI. This does require an additional subscription, like I had mentioned. So this isn't something that we'll be covering. And then finally, featured content. If we did have any featured content, it would show up here, and it would give us some different details about it. And again, we'd be able to manage that featured content from here as well. All right, so I'm going to head back here to the home screen, and that's going to wrap up our overview of the admin portal. Next up, let's take a look at the tenant-specific settings available in Power BI Service. All right, so like we've talked a little bit about, tenant settings allow you to configure and manage the different capabilities and features within Power BI Service. But before we jump into Service, let's actually take a look at some of the settings that are really great to have enabled, along with some of the features that we really won't be covering. First up, when we're going through this course, we're going to be using the new look for Power BI Service. There may be a toggle in the top middle of your Power BI service screen to shift between the new and the old view. For this course, we're going to strictly be using the new look. Help and support settings, I'll show you exactly what this is in a minute, but this is a great piece of functionality to enable for your organization. We'll talk about the new workspace settings, basically the new versus classic workspace setup. Talk about some of the export and sharing options. We'll look at content packs and app settings. This next bullet here about Power BI R and Python visuals. This is really about being able to add or import custom visuals, along with being able to build visuals from R and Python code that you may want to import. We'll take a look at audit and usage settings. And finally, kind of wrap up looking at different dashboard, data flow, and Q&A settings. And because this course is really focused on the business intelligence analyst, some of the options within your tenant settings are really focused on an IT or a information security type role. So because of this, we're not going to cover things like information protection, integration settings, developer settings, template apps, and then some advanced networking settings. One of the things to keep in mind here is that some of these tenant settings could expose your organization to unnecessary risk and may not need to be activated. As a best practice, I'd recommend to always configure your tenant to align with your organization's policies and best practices. All right, so with that, let's get out of the slides and let's head over to Power BI and dive into this. All right, so we had left off in our home screen here. So let's head to our tenant settings. And from our admin portal, we go to tenant settings. And the way that this menu or this view is set up is you have a group and then some sub items within that group. So here you see we have help and support settings, workspace settings, information protection, export and sharing, and there's many more sections here. So let's quickly jump into some of these and, we'll hit some of these subcategories within each one of these topics. So this publish get help information here, this is actually a really cool feature. What this allows you to do is enter custom URLs for things like your training documentation, a discussion forum. You could send licensing requests to a specific place, that these could go to your licensing admin for approval, or sent to the billing admin for approval. You can also add a link to your help desk here, right? So to enable this, you would click enable or disable, right? So this is a really cool feature to have enabled, right? Whenever you apply a setting within Power BI, you'll get some sort of message that'll say like, hey, you're changing some tenant settings. It's going to take a little bit for those settings to apply. All right, so continuing on here, we've got things like receiving email notifications for service outages. You can allow your users to try Power BI paid features for free. This is one of the features that we're taking advantage of, is that 60 days of either Pro or Power BI Premium per user. You can do things like show a custom message before publishing reports, something to the effect of, hey, you're about to publish a report to go out to your entire organization. Are you sure you want to do this? So the workspace settings options here are about creating a new workspace, the new workspace experience, blocking the classic workspace creation, right? And then the ability to use data sets across workspaces. So we want to make sure that we're enabling the new workspace experience, that we're disabling or blocking users from being able to create classic workspaces. And we also want to make sure that our different users and teams can share data sets across workspaces. Information protection, like I said, we're not really going to touch on that. And then here we've got a ton of different export and sharing settings. One of the really cool features here is this Azure Active Directory guest users within Power BI. This uses something called the Active Directory B2B service, and you can actually invite users that are external to your organization, so people with a different domain, into your organization's Power BI tenant to share and collaborate with them. Again, there's a little bit of setup involved here, but it's really cool. These next couple of sub-items here also have to do with the Active Directory piece, where you can invite external users to your organization, or you can allow them to edit and manage content within the organization. Publish to web. This is a really cool way that you can share content that you have created with anybody that has the link. You're publicly publishing reports that don't require any sort of authentication, meaning somebody doesn't have to sign into a site to view it. From a security standpoint, just be aware that anybody with that link on the internet can access it. So again, this is where we talk about adhering to your organization's, best practices and policies here. And again, there's a ton of options here. You can do things like copy and paste visuals, export to Excel or CSV, download the reports, allow live connections, export to PowerPoint, view image files, print your dashboards, email subscriptions, print dashboards and reports. So there's really a ton of sharing options here. You have the ability to certify your data sets, right? If you are creating a data set or a data flow in a production environment versus a development environment, you could mark or certify the data set or data flow that was ready for production so other people within your organization would know that it's ready to be used. You can enable email subscriptions so users can subscribe to a report and receive an email of it on some sort of frequency. You can set featured content. This is kind of a cool feature. We'll apply this. Right? See, we get that same message that pops up. Right? Allow connections to feature tables. This is actually a feature that you would have to set up in Power BI Desktop within the data model to make this available. And then share to Teams. If your organization uses Teams, you can actually share and collaborate within Teams as well. Content packs and app settings. This is all about publishing and distributing content throughout your entire organization. You have different integration settings. Again, a lot of this stuff we're not going to touch on. ArcGIS Maps is a really cool mapping tool. So this would be a fun one to enable if it's not already available to you. Same thing with Power BI visuals here. This is really all about making sure that you can add custom visuals or import visuals from the app source. Audit and usage. This gives you the ability to see who's using your report, the types of activities that they're taking, and that kind of stuff. Dashboard settings. One of the fun things here is that you can add web content onto dashboard tiles. We're going to do a demo of this later where you could actually create a dashboard tile that's a live version of a web page. Wrapping up here, developer settings, admin API settings. A lot of that stuff we're not going to cover. Data flow settings. If this isn't enabled, you won't be able to create data flows, and that's a major portion of what we're going to be covering here. So make sure that you can create data flows. Q&A settings. This allows us to use the natural Q&A processing in Power BI service to be able to ask natural language questions and create visuals. And then last, the advanced networking, right? Another piece that we're really not going to cover here. That was fast and furious, and there's a lot there. Right? And as you can see, there are a ton of options that can be configured for your tenant. One of the great things about Power BI Service is that this list of options and settings really just continues to grow as the Power BI team increases the functionality of the product. So this tenant settings menu, along with the overarching admin portal options, will likely continue to evolve and be updated over time. I'm really excited to see what new features that the team's going to roll out. All right, so with that, let's wrap this lecture up, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, pro tip lecture time. In this lecture, we're going to walk through setting up custom branding for your Power BI service tenant, which really allows you to customize the look and feel of your tenant across your entire organization. So as we've seen, custom branding is an option that's available from within the admin portal. It's really very straightforward to set up and allows you to customize 3 different elements. The first element is your logo, and once added, this logo will appear at the top left of your tenant window, directly above the left-hand navigation pane. Second, you can add a cover image. This cover image will be featured on the home screen where the welcome message is written. And third, you can change the theme color of your tenant, which updates the color used for the background of the top navigation bar on every page. All right, so let's go add custom branding to our Maven Inspectional Services tenant. All right, so we're in our Tenant Settings menu here. We need to head down to Custom Branding. And like we saw on the slide, we have 3 options to add here, right? Actually, first, let's do this. Let's head back home. And you can see here that we have our greeting on our home screen. Good morning, Samantha. You can see on the top left here, it just says Power BI, and that our header color is this black-gray color, right? Those are the 3 elements that are going to change. So let's head back to that option, Custom Branding. So first thing that we're going to do is add a logo. And Power BI gives us a little bit of guidance here where the image size should be a PNG. It can be 10 kilobytes or smaller and at least 200 by 30 pixels. So I've got my Maven Inspectional Services logo here that I'm going to open. We see a preview in the box here. Next up, we're going to add in a cover image. And again, this says either a JPEG or a PNG, 1 megabyte or smaller, and for the size, at least 1920 by 160. Right, so we're going to upload this cover image PNG, right? And so that's going to be our cover image that'll show up on our home page. Lastly, I want to adjust the theme color to all white. Right, so we'll adjust that up there. We can preview or publish. Let's just publish this. And we'll take a look at what happens. Right, so if we reload, see, we see 2 of those elements, right? Our theme color is set to white. We see our logo in the top left-hand corner here, right? Which is above our navigation pane. And if we go back home, you can now see the background of our welcome here has changed. This banner has changed. All right, so that's really it. It's that easy to add the custom branding to your website. If you ever wanted to change it or remove it, you could click this Remove Custom Branding and it would clear all 3 of these elements and reset it to default. You could delete the individual elements if you wanted, but that's it. That's how you would go through and set up custom branding for your Power BI tenant. Okay, last lecture of this section, and I wanted to take a couple of minutes to reinforce some of the best practices when it comes to Power BI service administration. First off, make sure to set and adjust common settings. So things like the new tenant view, new workspace creation, making sure data flows are available, analyze in Excel, a lot of those things that we talked about when we went through the different tenant settings. By doing this, you're really making sure that all of the different teams across your organization have access to the tools that they need to perform their jobs, right? And they don't need to go to somebody else to have them turn some sort of feature on. Second, make sure to enable and populate the helpful links and resources. By filling in the different URLs in the Publish Get Help information section, you're not only defining a good process for users within your tenant, but you're also providing a way for users to find help from your internal company documentation or reach the right resource, meaning the right person to ask for assistance, like the help desk or some other organizational admin. Third, make sure that you're adhering to your organization's policies and best practices. At the end of the day, that's what really matters here, is what's in the best interest of your organization. There are features within Power BI that, when enabled, may unnecessarily put your data at risk, so anything that you can do to alleviate those types of risks is probably a good thing. And finally, breathe a little life into your tenant by adding custom branding. It's super quick to add and will let your teams and clients feel more at home.